In 2016, I raised the issue of our bail laws in this House when I told your predecessor how more than 250,000 offences have been committed in Ireland in the previous 10 years by people who were out on bail at the time. The only thing that has changed since that is that the numbers have gone up. In the decade from 2011 to 2020, offenders who were out on bail were found responsible by a court for a staggering total of 261,427 crimes. They include 84 homicides and almost 9,000 threats to murder or serious assaults, and more than 4,000 robberies, 16,000 burglaries and 65,000 thefts. These figures are, of course, only relate to those offenders who were caught and convicted in the courts, and do not include maybe thousands more serious offences for which nobody was charged and convicted. Last year alone, people already on bail in respect of other charges accounted for 1 in every 6 crimes for which there was a court conviction. It's a shocking stat that they were responsible for 1 in every 5 murders. 25% of those convicted of explosive and firearm offences were also on bail at the time, as were 16% of those convicted of robbery, extortion and hijacking offences. More than 1,200 burglars, and again, those are just the ones who were caught, were out on bail when they decided to wreak havoc on other people's lives. In total, more than 30,000 people convicted of a criminal offence in the Irish courts last year who are offenders who were out on bail, and that's in the middle of a global pandemic when overall crime figures were down. It's clear that something needs to be done about easy access to bail for serial offenders who have no hesitation in leaving court and going out on the street to inflict further trauma, injury and worse on others. It's obvious that the rules governing the granting of bail to repeat offenders are not protecting the members of the public from suffering further harm at the hands of these people. You might say to me, Taoiseach, that changes were made since I raised this issue in 2016, that the bail laws were tightened through the Criminal Justice Act 2017, but the evidence of their effectiveness would suggest otherwise. The numbers of offenders committing crimes while on bail has increased since the start of the last decade. In 2011, the total less than 25,000, but last year, as I said earlier, this has gone up to more than 30,000, and the previous year it was well over 31,000. My question to you today, Taoiseach, is will you undertake to further strengthen the laws governing the granting of bail to people charged with serious offences, making real changes in order to protect the law-abiding citizens of our country?
Thank you, Deputy Grealish. Taoiseach.
First of all, I thank Deputy Grealish for raising this particular issue, because I do think it's extremely important that people have a genuine sense of security and feeling safe in their communities and in their homes, and that's a priority for the Government and the Minister for Justice. And we are striving to provide that safety through engagement with communities, by reducing crime, tackling recidivism and by supporting victims. Now, I am aware of recent media coverage in relation to the operation of the bail system, and also, as you know, the decision to grant bail in a particular case is a matter for the presiding judge, who is independent in the exercise of his or her judicial functions. It's important to be clear also that there is a constitutional presumption in favour of bail, as a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. So, notwithstanding that, it is open to judges under Section 2 of the Bail Act to refuse bail for a serious offence, where that is reasonably considered necessary to prevent the commission of a serious offence. That provision has been strengthened several times, most recently in the Criminal Justice Act of 2017. Now, following a review of the operation of the bail laws, that Act was introduced. Now, in the Justice Plan of 2021, the overriding imperative of our prisons policy through a penal reform action plan will be to develop policies which support reductions in the rate of reoffending and help reintegrate those who have committed crimes safely back into their communities. I will discuss this with the Minister for Justice in terms of the issues that you've raised with the numbers of offenders committing crimes while out on bail. There is a need. There's 2 elements to that. We have to tackle repeat offending in general, and then there's the question, as you've outlined, the operation of the bail system. The Minister for Justice is prioritising, along with Minister Brown, the whole area of reoffending, penal reform action plan, particularly applying to young people and engagement with young people. And so there's a number of initiatives underway to try and break the cycle of reoffending, which I think is an important aspect to this. There's a joint agency response to crime initiative, which is a multi-agency response to the supervision and rehabilitation of prolific offenders. And there's a number of rehabilitation and reintegration focused programmes for prisoners pre and post release from custody. We understand that certain offences have relatively high rates of offending while on bail. Again, it is a matter for the trial judge to determine whether bail should be granted, weighing up the factors in each individual case. The government will be taking further measures to increase access to addiction treatment, education and employment opportunities, and increased use of community-funded organisations. So, I will continue to engage with the Minister on the operation of the bail system. There are constitutional issues around that and the presumption in favour of granting bail, and that cannot be understated.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And the Act of 2017 does, the court, under that Act, the court is required to have regard to persistent serious offending by an applicant for bail and the nature and seriousness of any danger presented by the granting of bail to a person charged with an offence that carries a penalty of 10 years imprisonment or more.
Deputy Grealish.
Taoiseach, I mentioned the inadequacy of the bail laws earlier and the impact they have on people and of this country, but there's another related issue I would also like you to turn your attention to. Not only are people getting bail and going out to reoffend, but they are costing the taxpayer millions at the same time. In the past 5.5 years, criminal legal aid has cost the taxpayer almost €350 million, averaging more than 60 million a year and rising. Taoiseach, but there is no limit to the number of times offenders can get this free legal representation under current laws, no matter how many times they appear before the courts. Last year alone, again in the middle of the pandemic, more than 61 million was paid out under the main criminal legal aid scheme involving more than 73,000 cases. These criminals are laughing in the face of the justice system. They get the best of legal representation in court, courtesy of the Irish taxpayer, no matter how many times they have offended in the past, and they seem to be able to get bail just as easily, only to rob, murder and assault at will. Taoiseach, will you agree there needs to be a major review of the criminal free legal aid scheme also?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, I think, first of all, I would say that it is a matter of grave concern that serial reoffending and people offending while out in bail, it causes immense anger to the community at large and to people. And I think that's very well put. And again, that's a matter that we have to keep under review, because we've got a lot of serious cases that have, and issues that have arisen while people were out in bail and serious crimes were committed. There is a general scheme of a criminal legal aid bill currently being prepared, and the key purpose of that general scheme will be to transfer the administration of the criminal legal aid scheme to the Legal Aid Board. And there's a number of reforms that are being considered for inclusion in the scheme, and that's new sanctions relating to the provision of false or misleading information, introducing an improved financial assessment system for criminal legal eligibility, and then updating the law on criminal legal aid generally. So there will be an opportunity when that legislation is approved by government and comes before the House for deputies to make their contributions and input into that legislation, and that will involve reform of the system.
Thank you very much. That concludes for today.